It's off and turn it back on.
Good to go? Okay. We'll go ahead and call this Tooele City Planning Commission meeting to order this Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, here in council chambers. Our first item on our agenda tonight is our Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is our roll call. Commissioner Hammer.
Here.
Commissioner Proctor.
Here.
Commissioner Sloan. Here. Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Goches. Please recognize Commissioner Dunn. We'll excuse Councilman Hanson. Please recognize Councilwoman Manzione. We also have staff members Mr. Hall, Mr. Agard, Mr. Hanson, and Mr. Stewart in here tonight. All right, number 3 on our agenda tonight is a public hearing and recommendation to consideration of a request by the Marcosian Auto Group to amend the land use map designation of the property located at 1232 West Utah Avenue from regional commercial to industrial. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. I was trying to time my walk perfectly. I didn't get it quite right.
Do us a strut next time.
We'll try it.
I'll talk slower.
Okay. This is, as you said, a request for a land use map amendment. I think the first thing we want to make sure we understand for us and the public is just a reminder that there are two kinds of maps in the city that we look at a lot. One of them is in the general plan. That's the land use map, and that's a designation that is so similar to zoning in its appearance and color and things that it bears repeating the changes, the differences between them. Tonight's application is a request to change that land use designation, not the zoning. The land use designation, that land use map should match the zoning and support the zoning. And so that's the first thing I wanted to make clear. This is not about the zoning yet. This is an application for the land use map. The property is, as you said, at 1232 West Utah Avenue. It's a recently built business from Marcosian Auto. It's a fairly large building. The land use map designation is regional commercial. The zoning itself is actually light industrial. So you can see that that red color, that's the regional commercial. Across the street, across Utah Avenue, is industrial. And then you have high density residential to the east and north. For those land use designations, those are supposed to guide the zoning. So the Marcosian Auto Group has asked for this change because they have some activities that they want to add to their building there, to their process, to their business model. They're selling cars there. They're making some repairs there. Eventually, they need to make more repairs there, and they have some cars that are brought in or they want to bring in that are they're damaged or they're repossessed, and they need to be able to store them there. That's not allowed in the zoning that they're in, which is light industrial. So again, this is the zoning map. It's slightly different. That industrial zoning here matches that previously, on the previous map, that industrial category there, you see. But light industrial here does not support that activity of keeping those cars there. So those cars that have been damaged and are waiting repairs, waiting for insurance to come through for those repairs to be done, and cars that have been repossessed, they can't keep those on the site. They'd like to be able to do that. In order to do that, they need to change the zoning to light industrial, or from light industrial to industrial. We can't support that unless the Planning Commission and City Council are willing to support a change in that land use map from industrial, or from regional commercial to industrial. I hope that makes sense. This is, again, that's the first part of the request, and we brought it to you tonight for your consideration and a recommendation to the City Council. This is just a shot looking across Utah Avenue at the building that they've built there, the cars for sale. Their plans were to expand that operation and do more, but again, that zoning's not in matching with what they want to do. A couple of the things that we noted in reviewing as a planning staff about the property, looking at it and the general plan and that land use map and the things that go along with that versus the criteria that we should be considering as a city for making this kind of a change or supporting or rejecting this kind of a change. One of the first things we noted is that the adjacent properties are usually or mostly undeveloped, or they're industrial in their nature and their use right now. There aren't any residential properties that are immediately adjacent or in the vicinity at this time. However, there are several adjacent properties to the north and the east that are designated high-density residential, as you saw in that shot here. So these areas are slated to go high-density residential potentially in the future. So that's something to consider as well. There are several large adjacent properties that are designated industrial currently, and that subject property, you could consider an expansion of that industrial zoning and the industrial land use that's already there in the area. The proposed designation would allow some further development of the property, expanding their existing use that is kind of light industrial in nature. I believe the applicants would have more information about that if you're interested in hearing about that. And the proposed industrial uses would require careful buffering regardless of what happens for adjacent properties. Because there are residential properties slated to come in the future, we'd want to make sure that those are buffered. In keeping with that, or just to show you the kinds of things we'd be talking about, the applicant sent us some photos. This is the area of the property currently that they would want to use for some of the storage of those other automobiles. Those would be screened with some kind of fencing. This is the typical kind of fencing that you see in that area where there are vehicles stored or other equipment stored. Larger fences, solid fences, we would recommend that if that time comes, if it's approved for any kind of zone change. The last thing to consider is that the proposed designation would allow the property owner to expand that operation on this site and do some increases for employment numbers as well. I think Mr. Burrows is here representing Marcosian Auto. He could talk to you about that a little bit. With that, we will turn it over to the commission for questions if you have any questions for us at this time.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Goches?
Jared, I just wondered if you heard from adjacent landowners. I didn't receive anything, so were there comments?
We only got one comment. We got a comment in person tonight. I could save it for the public comment portion, but since you've asked, I'll just let you know we did get a comment from the Clegg family that owns property to the east and north in opposition to the change. They're concerned about industrial uses expanding further toward their properties that are slated to go residential. Thanks.
Commissioner Hammer?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I drove by there today. There are quite a few cars. How will what's happening at this business now change, and what would it look like? Because it looks like there are already repossessed cars and cars waiting to be repaired. And I mean, the majority of the cars surrounding the building look like what we're talking about tonight.
Mm-hmm. And I've been down, I haven't seen, we did have a situation where there were some cars that were stored on the back part of the property that needed to be moved. The Marcosians moved those. Alan helped facilitate that, and then that's how they came to talk to us about making this change. You shouldn't see a lot of those. You might see a few come and go at any dealership, anywhere there's cars for sale, but this would be, I guess, and I'll let Alan speak to that if you want, my guess is that it would just be more significant in numbers, and they would want it significant enough that they would want to enclose that with that fencing and make sure that it's not visible. So. Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, this item does require a public hearing. Is the applicant here tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give you a few minutes after the public hearing to address this, and just so you don't want to do it right now. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing for this particular item tonight. If you would please approach the podium, write your name for the record, and state your name for the audible record. Seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask the applicant to come on up and let us know what your plans are, what's going on.
I'm Alan Burrow, and I represent Marcosian Auto. This is my first public hearing, and I'm not a public speaker. But with that being said, Nick Marcosian came out here to Tooele to, expand his business and incorporate his other businesses along with that. And with that business adventure, now we have 35 jobs out here in the Tooele building out there that are mechanics and sales staff, and we have a small parts store in the building that's owned by AutoZone, and so they are supplying us directly with parts. So this has been a big, I hope, a benefit to the people in Tooele, because we've brought some jobs, and currently out of the staff of about 9 people have now moved out here or are living out here currently. So we're not Detroit. But we are, looking to become a little bit bigger player in the market. And that was one of the reasons for Nick to buy the building is to service cars and send them out to his other locations. Of course, first and foremost, we want to be a good neighbor to Tooele. And that is something he would like to emphasize with everybody here. I mean, we are flexible. We want to do the right thing. We want to keep Tooele and the residents here first and foremost in our thoughts because we want to be a good business partner as well as a good, facility out here. And, so this plays a big part into his plans, is to expand and grow. The fence that you saw, those pictures came from, that fence is something we have under building right now. That fence is located just to the west of our facility. It's the LKQ facility. And so they enclose cars and sell parts to other people in the country. So to me, it seems to be rather user-friendly to hide anything that, may be not so sightly. We did have cars out there on the property, which I do apologize for. It looked like a junkyard. I'll be the first to admit it. And, it wasn't what I had in mind, but it got a little out of hand once we got there, and now we've got it back in control. Again, I'm very hands-on and, willing to do the right thing at the right time, within reason, and Nick Marcosian is that person. And like I said, this would just help Tooele as well as us. We've incorporated a lot of people here. Gilly's fabrication plant, we used Broken Arrow to help with the facility. We've used a lot of local suppliers and vendors out here, and that's first and foremost to me is to be a partner in a community. We want to get people involved with our works as well. So it's not like we're shuttling in, somebody from Salt Lake to do things. We're trying to incorporate as many people out here as we can. And again, we just want to be a good business partner with you guys and just help our business grow as well. So I think that's the long and short of the story. If you have any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
Yeah, let's bring this back to the commission. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Commissioner Hammer.
So you have 35 employees now, and with this, if you were to get this change in zoning, and how many employees would you have then?
I would, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that it'll go from the 35 up towards 50 to 55. And I mean, again, we'd like to bring a paint booth out here and start painting cars and build a facility out here as well. And then, do some more paintless, they call it body paintless dent repair work, and then, some detail work on cars. So there's a lot involved in doing cars, but, again, Nick has big visions for this, and it's just part of his business.
Good question. Commissioner Goches?
Thank you. I have some concerns about changing the land use. I have concerns for storage of vehicles that are damaged, that could leak oils and gasoline and contaminate the soil and affect the groundwater. So what kind of prevention measures and what kind of surface is going to be used out there to protect the environment?
Yeah, right now we've just put down road base, 8 inches of road base in that particular area that we'd like to use. The cars that are coming in, so let me back up a little bit. So like the heating facility that's in the warehouse, so when those cars come in, we're draining out those fluids because those fluids are actually heating the building. So we're using the actual oil, not the gas, that's getting transported out, but the oil and those types of things are getting burned back into the facility to heat that facility. And it's kind of unique in this situation because there's no natural gas out there to use when it's not piped out there. So those things are getting drained out before they get put on the property. The repossessed cars are being looked at to see if they are leaking. So we can, drain those contaminants out before we store them. But there is a process that we go through that the cars are looked at to see if there's major leaks or any contamination, because certainly we don't want to be a hazardous waste facility. That's not what we want to do. I mean, we're doing everything we can do to prevent it.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just as a side point, we don't believe in, we don't want to have long-term storage. Like I said, we don't want to be a junkyard. That's kind of one of the things we don't want to be. So,
Is there a maximum to the number of vehicles that you can store on your site? Maybe that's something I need to ask Jared. Not? Okay, it's just
Whatever
space
fits
available.
behind the site obscuring fence, right?
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for any other questions.
Chairman, I have one more question.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hammer.
Jared, you said that you received a public comment in person, but then we didn't hear anything. Can you share any?
Just,
Comment?
all I know is that the Clegg family that
reports.
owns property out there to the rear, I can just show you. The Clegg's property is back in this area, and it's part of that land that's slated to be high-density residential. They have concerns about there being vehicle storage out there, so they're opposed to that's all I know. They have concerns about there being vehicle storage,
Okay.
about it being industrial and the other things that go with that, and they are opposed to the change.
Thank you.
So, Jared, pardon me,
Yep,
Commissioner, if
go
I
ahead.
could ask another question. I have concerns about changing the zoning, the land use
Land
from
use.
light industrial to industrial because of the long-term impact. So if this business were to close and go away, that industrial designation would allow other businesses to come in with heavier uses that maybe are not intended with this applicant. And, we're glad that they're a good partner in employing people in our community, but we also have to look out for the long term. So could you give us a little bit of insight on what could possibly happen if we change that to industrial designation?
Sure, and that's a valid concern. Always the concern with zone changes is the applicant in front of you for a zone change is the owner at the time, but things do change, as you point out. Heavy industrial uses are mostly this. The biggest difference between light industrial and the industrial zoning and this designation is the storage of vehicles, and then there's manufacturing uses that just are not anticipated in light industrial that would be allowed in regular industrial. I think that I don't have the list in front of me of the different kinds of manufacturing, but in light industrial, you're looking more at service-oriented industrial for that. You can do things like sell cars. That's an allowable use in this zone. You can do a lot of different things in light industrial that you can't do in industrial that are more service-oriented like that. It's just lighter uses. You don't see the heavy manufacturing. You don't see storage of, you can do warehousing. That's a more typical use for light industrial. It's kind of the transitional industrial zone. You don't see the manufacturing, the fabrication of metals and things like that. Chemicals, things like that are allowed in industrial that are not allowed in light industrial. So, and then again, I think Alan mentioned part of their future plan here is also to do auto body work. That requires the industrial zone. It's not allowed in the light industrial. So auto body, they can do repairs, but not body work and paint with the light industrial designation.
I've got a follow-up question.
Yep, sure.
It's not to that, but it's to the environmental question that I had regarding there's not a solid surface out there. There's just gravel that the vehicles are parked on. And even though they have good intention to bring the vehicles in and drain them, what do you do in the event that there's a damaged vehicle that does...
It does leak.
You leak.
Yeah.
Can we put a condition that they need to put a solid surface? Do you have a recommendation? Is there a code that is required for storage of vehicles?
It's a great question. There's not a code that requires certain things for the storage of vehicles in terms of there's not a code specific to the storage of vehicles in these zones that deals with a zoning code that deals with the drainage or things like that. But drainage and appropriate protection of groundwater are always things that are required under our other rules. So we would look at those surfaces and look at the drainage, look at how that's all working with a site plan application that would come for this fenced area. So engineering would look at what kind of surface will work, how it will drain, and whether the groundwater would be protected by that surface. It happens in the industrial zone a lot. This would not be the only place in the city where there are vehicles stored or wrecked vehicles stored. So we do deal with it, but not through the zoning. It's
Okay.
part of engineering's review.
So that would be in the future?
Yeah,
Okay,
it would be
thank
for
you.
the future. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Sloan.
Sure.
This one predates you a little bit, so maybe we have to go to Andrew for this one. Sure. And maybe the commission can enlighten me and remind me. The industrial service zoning that got created for the business park, would this be more appropriate? Would it not make any difference?
That's a great
Because
question. and I don't
I
know.
share the same concerns that Commissioner Gochus does. But I'm wondering if it seems like we did a lot of that so we could store vehicles within that.
I would say in regards to this, the industrial service zone would not really do any difference. It pretty much is just slightly lighter than the light industrial zone in regards to the uses that are permitted. It's not something that would really be a candidate for what the applicant wishes to do here.
Thank you, I couldn't remember. Thank you.
Good questions, good concerns. I appreciate it. Get some clarity on there. Any other questions for staff from the commission?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. I'll entertain a motion on this item. This is just a recommendation. This will go to the city council for next appropriate steps.
Mr. Chairman, in the absence of anybody else looking up to do that, I think I'm reading the room a little bit, maybe I'm not. I'll move that we forward a negative recommendation to the City Council for application number P23-1369, request by Marcosian Auto to amend the land use map designation to the 6.9 acre parcel located at 1232 West Utah Avenue from regional commercial to industrial, based on the following findings, which in this case is we've got some concerns, some environmental concerns, some future use concerns.
Future use concerns, probably the main one.
That's the one that bothers me the most. I think the other stuff can be mitigated, but I'm not sure we can't mitigate, certainly not at this level.
Okay.
I'll
Right.
second that.
I got a negative recommendation from Commissioner Sloan and a second from Commissioner Gochus. Any other discussion before we take this to the vote? Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor? Aye. Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gochus?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one is a negative recommendation, but this still goes up to the city council for the next steps, and they will make the final decision there. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. And I failed to mention we do have our new alternate commissioner, Mr. Anderson, here tonight as well. I did not know you were our alternate, so now I know. Welcome. We're glad to have you. All right. Number 4 on our agenda tonight is a public hearing and recommendation. It's a consideration of proposed ordinance 2023-39, amending Tooele City Code, Chapter 2.2-9, regarding the landmark site designation process for the preservation of significant historical properties. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Commission. So just a little background on this. As we, a few years ago, like two and a half years ago, really started getting into this Utah Main Street program that we're part of, right? And our historic downtown Tooele and some of the improvements we're trying to make there. We started to learn a lot about historic preservation and best practices and that sort of thing. We began a process, and really there was a big survey done called a Reconnaissance Level Survey, an RLS survey done in 2019 in the downtown area, where the State Historic Preservation Office came in and kind of analyzed all the properties and said which ones were contributing to the historic quality character of the area and which ones weren't, That led us to this summer creating a historic district that was accepted and approved on the National Register of Historic Places. So what does that do for us? It's a tool for property owners to access historic rehab tax credits, which is great. Enables more grants, and it also is useful for telling the stories and telling the history and recognizing the cultural significance of that. What that national district does not do is actually prevent any changes to those buildings, or it doesn't preclude a property owner from just tearing down a building if they were to choose to do that. Then, as things go forward, we had the closure of the Ritz Theater, right? And so at that point, we kind of realized, and this was already something that had some thought to it, we kind of realized, okay, it might be important to consider a local landmark ordinance, which would be, rather than just a tool, it would be kind of a tool with some teeth, right? A local landmark ordinance, and that's what this is, creates a process by which the city can designate a property significant enough and say this is a landmark. We want to make sure it doesn't get torn down. We want to make sure that if there are changes that want to be done by a property owner, like painting the building or something like to that effect, that those could be approved and go through some kind of review process on a particularly significant and historic property. So with that context in mind, I want to just run through briefly the criteria for buildings, right? And that is, there's a list A through H in number 2 in the ordinance. A, B, and C have to apply to a structure to be eligible. So it has to be located within Tooele City, be 50 years old, and have no major alterations from the historic character of when it was constructed. Those 3 things have to be true, and then there's another list of others that at least one of them has to apply. And that could be that it's listed currently on the National Register of Historic Places or is in a district and recognized as contributing to that district. It has to be associated with significant events or people, or has a unique architecture or character that is particular and unique. So this won't apply broadly to every property, I think is an important thing to note, right? It's pretty limited on which properties could apply. Then the process for this would be that any property owner or person, also the Historic Preservation Commission, could nominate through an application a property, and that would then be reviewed by staff and by the Historic Preservation Commission. They would recommend to you what should happen on the property, and then those applications would come to this commission and be either approved or denied as historic landmarks. So that's kind of the process. And once a property is approved by the Planning Commission as a historic landmark, it would be recorded at the county on that property. So if it changes ownership, that would come up on a title report, right? If there is proposed changes to a property owner wants to change things, they would have to go through an application that would be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission and then by this group, and they would have to receive a certificate of appropriateness, which is kind of a goofy, very historic preservation term that's used in the preservation community. To say, okay, this proposed modification is appropriate and will continue to honor the historic character of the structure, I guess is how that kind of goes. Demolition would be prohibited unless there's a real health and safety issue, a fire or something like that, right? Could cause demolition of a property regardless of this. And lastly, what happens if a property, something is changed and they didn't go through that application process? They would have, this does create a requirement that they would have to remediate that and either return it to its former status or to a historic status. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. You know, there's, I think we have a unique opportunity, and there's particular structures like the Ritz, the Pioneer Museum, the Carnegie Library, and some others that are important to the community and culturally, and whatever happens in the future with ownership, this is a tool where we can make a difference in preservation of those particular properties.
All right, we'll bring this back to the commission. I got one comment I'd like to make first off. This kind of helps prohibit building owners from painting 100-year-old brick. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes, it would, if they're designated as a landmark.
That would
right?
make my day.
Yeah.
Antique brick is beautiful. So, anyway, any other questions from the commission?
I
Yes,
don't
Commissioner
know if it's
Robinson.
questions as so much as comments about things I don't like. Couple concerns I have. I don't like the 50-year-old thing. I think that's way too recent. I mean,
For
that's,
those of us that are older than that, I've got
well,
concerns with that as well.
regardless of ages of those of us up here, 50 years is just does not to me say landmark site. I mean, that's what, 73?
Tree.
Yeah, that's not that old. I have clothes almost that old. And then I
retro.
don't like the subjectivity of the association with people or events in the city, state, or nation. I'm okay with that being a little bit more defined and being a criteria, but if it meets those top three and it only needs one more associated with the life of somebody, I don't want something to have to be preserved because Brigham Young walked by and blew his nose in front of the house. And with that vagueness there, someone could make that argument. And so I'd like to see that tightened up a little bit so that these are real historic places substantiated by historic events or people, not just whims. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And, you know, there's 50 years doesn't seem far back, right? And that's something that comes up not just here with this group, but that is the standard set by the National Park Service and also the State Historic Preservation Office. They use a 50-year timeline, which does seem odd. There's some structures that you might not think of as historic, but that were maybe built in the 1980s in a very architectural brutalist, design, that someone that could be, historic in their own regard, I guess. But, well, 1980s isn't 50 years ago, though, so I'll take that back, I guess.
Getting close.
So maybe there's some reason that it is 50 years. I'm certainly not opposed to adjusting this, per recommendation of the group. I think I'm very open to making that 100 years. I think as we looked at some of the other communities, St. George might have had 100 years on theirs. I think the other ones all had 50, but, I think there's
I'm fine with
grounds for
100.
that.
I don't care what other groups have. I still think 50 is ridiculous.
Do you have a different
I think
number?
100 would be fine.
Oh, 75. would be-
75 I could
Meet in the
go
middle.
with.
I was going to ask what year was the Ritz constructed? I think that
40.
was
39.
okay.
39, yeah.
So if we did 100, the Ritz wouldn't be, historic, I guess, right? But 75,
And to me, the Ritz is borderline,
okay.
in my view.
And I think we can certainly look at tightening up the other
That's just
part of
my-
that.
I'm saying that I recognize I'm one of 7, but those are my concerns.
Commissioner Sloan?
I'm struggling with this one. There's the part of me that realizes I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else, and frankly, I've almost lived here long enough to qualify for historic status. What I struggle with is the first line, 3A. I'm a little concerned with the application process. Any person, group, or association may nominate a prospective historic research for formal designation. I too want to keep a hold of the Ritz. I frankly would love to do that whole block. But I've got a problem from a property rights standpoint with somebody else coming in and telling me what I can or cannot do with my property. And maybe if this was a little more narrowly focused geographically, whether it matches the downtown overlay district or something along those lines, that's where I'm having my heartburn, because I really am torn in 2 different directions. I know what you're trying to do, and I applaud it and I agree with it. But I don't necessarily like the thought that anybody can come in and just start that investigation. And yeah, I'm going to be notified of it, but I can't do anything about it. And I would be concerned, and I'm sure this has come from other places, at what point does that become a takings? And Roger's not here to answer that question, but that would be a concern for me. But by all means, the downtown area needs to be protected as best we can. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here a little bit, but I've got some concern over the broadness of that statement. Especially unless we change it to the 100-year thing. And we've got a lot of houses in this town that fall under that we're going to keep somebody from disposing of their parents' property when they pass away, for lack of a better example, because somebody could come in and just decide, you know what, Brigham Young walked by and blew his nose. And so I'd be much more amenable to something that covered, whether it's the downtown overlay and maybe the Broadway area or whatever. Of course, we seem to be burning everything down in Broadway, but narrowly focused a little bit more than that broad geographic definition of historical site.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious. We thought about you could do it in just downtown. That doesn't include Broadway. That wouldn't include like Central School necessarily, right? There's homes that a property owner could say, maybe the Clegg home is listed on the National Register, for example. That could be one that I could see having there might be interest in putting it on.
Jared, I think you just made my point for me. A property owner could go in and petition that, absolutely, 100%. The property owner's neighbor, I'm not quite on board with.
Yeah. Okay. Good feedback. Thank you.
Commissioner Jensen.
Well, my concerns are the exact same as Commissioner Sloan's. It was the same thing with the property rights, and I wasn't sure reading through it. It said that the property owner has the right to converse, or I can't remember what the word was, with the commission that's making these decisions and whatnot. But I think, I don't think it matters where it is in the city. I'm maybe a little bit different on that, but I think the property owner at the time has to be okay with it. That's my opinion. I don't think that somebody should be able to come in and tell somebody what they can do with their home, their building, whatever it is. But at the same time, like with Setaucus Market, where they're starting to fix it up, it looks beautiful. And I think it's great that they're doing that kind of things. We've fixed up a house that's over 140 years old, I believe. And we tried to do everything to time. We retuck pointed it, we used the right mortar. It was a lot of work, a lot of expense, which I'm okay with doing, but I have a hard time telling somebody else they have to do that. And that's my concern as well.
I would feel better if the homeowner was part, or the property owner, homeowner, was part of that petition process from the start. Somebody can say, hey, we'd like to this, but then they'd have to have the property owner's written permission to proceed. And then that way it could be anywhere in the city. But it'd be the property owner who would have to agree to it in writing.
And see, that might be some kind of middle ground, even between, that would enable like the Historic Preservation Commission to nominate a property, but they have to get an approval, right, from property owner.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
As long as their rights are protected, I'm on board. Although I'd like the 75 to 100 year. 50 just makes me squirm a little bit.
I'm not even there yet, so
I
I'm
know.
not worried about it.
It's quicker than you think.
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Goches.
A comment is that, when I read through this, I just wondered how that applies to residences within the district, which Commissioner Sloan brought up. So do we need to designate that? Do we need to specify what's the difference between residential buildings that are there and uses? And in fact, I would have loved to have seen the map of what was in the historic preservation area. I couldn't remember all of the places. And I can particularly think of a home that's for sale right now next to the hotel on Main Street. It's the Fenton Place. That was owned by that's my aunt and uncle's home. I've spent a lot of time there as a child, and it's well over that age. It's for sale, so I'm just kind of wondering how that would affect residences, and if the ordinance needs to specify the difference between commercial, public uses, residential uses. That was,
Good question. I don't think it necessarily needs to specify because I think a residence could be just as a historic single-family home could be as historically significant as a commercial property. We have done a lot more work in Tooele City so far. Our downtown historic district is largely commercial, so we have more of that, of those types of properties surveyed, and we have a better understanding of those. I think one important part of an application, which we haven't developed like an application or form that would be used to apply for this yet, right? And that's something I'm working on right now. Part of that could be that it is required to have a survey from the State Historic Preservation Office that, shows that experts have come and evaluated it and, said that this is historic too. I don't know if that needs to be a requirement or something specified as well, but that's something that could be part of an application process, at least for consideration by the Historic Preservation Commission and this group, even if maybe maybe a property isn't up to the standards of the state preservation, maybe there's been modifications so it's not fully considered historic by the state. It could still be designated a landmark, I suppose. But that's going past your question. I apologize, but I think residential versus commercial, I don't think there's a need to really designate or define that in this document because it'll come on a case-by-case, basis as an application is made, and you can evaluate the significance individually, I think.
And I'm very favorable for historic preservation. I think that's really important. So maintains your community's character, the unique aspects, and I really like it. So I'm excited to refine this ordinance and make some, changes that will be acceptable to both the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other further questions from the commission? All right, this item does require a public hearing. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this particular item, please approach the podium. State your name for the audible record and write your name on the piece of paper provided. Okay, seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission. Any other further questions, discussion? I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes.
I propose that we make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with, I don't know if they'd be conditions, ideas that the property owner should have the final say if it's added to the Preservation Society, I guess, and also to extend the timeline to 75 years old. Is there anything else that I'd be missing that we talked about?
How about the application process and receiving did you call it a survey from the National Historic Society? How did you word that?
It's called a reconnaissance level survey, an RLS.
So what would you like to change with that? I'm not sure.
It's fine. It's part of the application.
Well, that would end my motion then.
Is there a condition that you wanted to get cleared up in there too that we need to discuss before we move forward with this? Just that one paragraph that you alluded to.
No, I think that enough work needs to be done that they should bring it back. I would move that we table it.
I was going to say that, but you hate when I table stuff.
Yeah, I do. I hate tabling things, and that's fine. There's a motion. We can see if it gets a second, but
Okay, I've got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Jensen with the condition to add the property owner's rights into the language and then the 75 to 100 years rather than 50 years. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, a second from Commissioner Proctor. Any other discussion before we move forward?
Just that I tend to agree with Commissioner Robinson. I'm going to vote no on this because it's not ready for prime time. I 100% support the concept, but, and the city council can do whatever they want to do, but I don't feel like it's ready to forward. There's too much, and Mr. Stewart himself admitted we haven't even started looking at what the application is going to look like. So I'll be voting no.
So I guess my parliamentary question is, if we, because it's a recommendation, if we vote no, then it goes forward nonetheless with a negative recommendation.
Yes.
So, with the motion being seconded now in order, it's going to move forward. There's not a chance to table it.
Can I amend my motion since I
Yes.
started it?
Or you can withdraw it.
Or you can withdraw
Or
it.
withdraw it.
We have not
Okay, I'll
voted.
withdraw my motion. I think we
All
need
right.
to talk about this a little bit more.
Right, Commissioner Jensen has withdrawn his
That'll
motion.
teach Roger to leave.
All right. With all of that having been said, I'll entertain another motion.
Okay,
on
I'll
this.
make a motion now.
Okay.
I move that we table this item until it comes back from Mr. Stewart with a couple of the ideas and the things that we've discussed come back to us. And of the table with a condition of when those things are met, not with a calendar date, but when he feels it's ready to come back to us after the things we've discussed are brought about.
Okay.
I'll second that.
I've got a motion from Commissioner Robinson to table this until Mr. Stewart can address our concerns and issues, and maybe we'll find more, who knows, huh? And a second from Commissioner Sloan. I might sleep on it and call you tomorrow. Do I have any other discussion before we take a vote on this one? Mr. Hall, did you have anything you wanted to before I take a vote?
In Roger's absence, can I suggest that you table the motion, or sorry, that you table the consideration to a certain date? You should not leave it open-ended.
We can do it to a condition and not just a date.
Okay, perfect then.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to table this particular item to give Mr. Stewart time to address those issues. And he'll bring it back when he's ready.
You comfortable that you know what we're trying to get at?
Yeah.
Okay. Not trying to kill it, promise.
No, pretty easy phrases.
Okay.
And then I got a second from Commissioner Sloan. Any other discussion? Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I'm Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye on this one. Thank you, guys. Good discussion. I like it.
There wasn't one to add in.
Moves us on to number 5 on our agenda tonight is a public hearing and recommendation for consideration of a proposed ordinance 2023-43, amending Tooele City Code Chapter 7-19 subdivision regulations. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Again, this is a proposed ordinance amending the subdivision regulations. Roger was not able to be here tonight, so I hope that I'm ready to talk to you all about it and answer your questions if you have any. We have gone through this before in a work session, so if you have other questions, please feel free to interrupt me, and I'm going to go through some of these items again and talk about these changes. To start with, these changes, they do go beyond some of the requirements of the state legislature from last year, but the impetus was the state legislature's requirement that the city council no longer be the land use authority or serve as the land use authority for subdivisions. To talk about that a little bit, we're going to talk about 3 types of things tonight. The type of application that the subdivision is, the recommending authority, the land use authority, who is the decision maker, and then whoever hears an appeal of those decisions. Right now, for preliminary subdivision plans, the recommending authority is the Planning Commission. You all make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council is acting as the land use authority. That part is what needed to be changed, for sure, because of the state Senate bill that was passed. So the City Council can no longer serve as that land use authority for subdivisions. And then an administrative hearing officer would hear any appeals of that land use authority's decision, right? For final plats, the recommending authority would be staff, the CD director, the public works director, city engineer, and the City Council again would serve as the land use authority and the administrative hearing officer for any appeals. For minor subdivisions, The recommending authority was the Community Development Director, the Public Works Director, the engineer, and then the City Council was the land use authority.
Jared, could I just interrupt you on
Sure.
1 second on that one? That is currently not correct. Right now,
Planning
the
Commission.
recommending authority for minor subdivisions is the Planning Commission.
So you are, yeah, that's incorrect in the slide, you're right, thank you. So, and you'll be doing that later tonight, and acting in that capacity, so it would be a good object lesson. It's too bad we have things in this order, that would have been great. And I want to point out for the record, too, that I did not make these slides. I'm just using Roger's slides. The administrative and the hearing officers would be the appeal authority. I'm petty as well, that's just how I am. So, that's the way we're currently set up. We kind of take a pause right there to go, we're going to address those things, but again, as we were looking at the subdivision ordinance as a city, we decided to clear up some other things as well and make a few other changes. One of those changes is that right now, because of the way that we're set up for the recommendations and for the land use authority, a lot of the work in detailed civil engineering work, there's a ton of it that goes into subdivisions. A lot of that is front-loaded and ready for things at preliminary plats. Through the use of checklists in the application items, we are going to be trying to back off of that a little bit and let preliminary subdivisions do less work, less detailed work, and focus more on the density, the lot layouts, the streets, et cetera. And then that detailed civil engineering work can be done for final reviews. That just kind of goes hand in hand with the way that we're reordering who's looking at and approving. So you as a body, as the Planning Commission, you're going to be looking more at just those basic subdivision components and not getting into the weeds of the civil engineering as much, based on the checklist we're looking at. Now, going on to the new way things are going to go, the recommending authority for preliminary plans, there's no recommending body except for staff bringing a subdivision to you all in review, and you would be the land use authority. Any appeal would be made to a committee of 3 that are chosen by the CD director and the Public Works Director. The recommending authority, again, for final plats, there isn't really one. Final plat approval would happen at the staff level. Once you've all said yes to a preliminary plan, then the final work gets done, that final engineering, all the detailed work gets done, and staff finishes making those approvals for that final plat, gets it ready to record. Any appeals of those kinds of decisions, if we're not able to approve a final plat, if they're just not getting the things done, would go to 3 engineers as a committee, formed when they're needed for those appeals. A developer's attorney, a developer's engineer, the city's choice for an engineer, and a neutral party that's agreed to by both of those other 2 engineers. For minor subdivisions, the change would be that the land use authority would just be the staff, that CD director, Public Works Director, and the city engineer. So minor subdivisions would no longer have to come to the Planning Commission at all. They would just be approved on a staff level. And then any appeals would again be engineers, developers, cities, and a neutral party that's agreed to by those other 2 engineers. Does that all make sense, pretty much?
It does. I have a question though, real
Sure.
fast. Who pays for the neutral engineer?
That's a great question.
Because that might change their neutrality.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, it might. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's probably people that need to do some pro bono work as engineers, but also the appellant would usually be the person paying for those kinds of things.
Okay.
So.
To that same point, when you say neutral, it was my understanding in the early conversation that by neutral, and we didn't necessarily mean neutral, but mutually agreeable to
Yeah,
both parties,
To both
correct?
parties, right.
Okay.
So it would be somebody without a dog in the fight. Does that make sense then? Is that okay? All right. Another thing that got added to this, as long as we were working on the subdivision ordinance, were changes to the flag lot ordinance, or not change, I'm not going to say changes, I'm going to say some tweaks to the flag lot ordinance, to clarifications. A flag lot, again, is an L-shaped lot where there's less frontage on the public road and a long staff portion going back to an open area that gets, that opens up and allows for a home to be built. So you can see in that diagram, these are included in the subdivision regulations. The main concerns were about fire department width. So what you're looking at is, the explanation is that normally we require 20 feet of asphalt. If that staff portion goes back further than 150 feet, then the fire department's going to want to see 26 feet of asphalt to get apparatus back there, and a turnaround area. And that turnaround area has to be provided at 20 feet and for 60-foot distances on either side, so you can turn an apparatus around. The maximum distance that a staff portion goes, 220 feet, that stays the same. We don't like to see them further back than that. One other minor change that's been proposed in this ordinance has to do with the adjacency, the contiguous flag lots. They do create some challenges for the public right-of-way where they meet the street, series of driveways. So one of the things that we've added would be a recommendation that no more than 2 properties be allowed to have flag lots contiguous to each other. So in this example, if these are not real, these are just my silly drawings done. These 2 lots would be allowed to have flag lots if they applied for them and were approved. The lots adjacent to them on the other side would not be allowed to do flag lot subdivision. They'd have to choose some other method to develop their property or use some other method. Now, we shouldn't be using flag lots everywhere. It's generally reserved for just really difficult properties, so this isn't the greatest example of an area, but it's the one that I could find. The other part of that would be that we'd rather not have and have prohibited, except for in certain areas of the city, those 2 staff portions being side by side. The reason for that is that you've got a property that's perhaps 75 feet wide. You have a 25 or 20-foot driveway on one side, another 26 feet for a staff on the other side, 26 feet for a staff adjacent to that, and then another 30 feet away, another driveway. We'd rather not have that situation. That's the reason for the contiguity rules and the adjacency of staff rules. Neither of those 2 rules, though, in the code that's been proposed, would apply in the infill residential areas that have been identified in the zoning. So where we're really trying to bring more housing, we don't want to have any situations where that would be an issue. So they're just not applicable in these geographic areas that are identified in code for infill housing. Any questions about that? Okay. That is essentially the code that's been proposed for subdivision ordinance amendments. There are some minor other things that we fixed in there. I didn't want to go through every single change. You do have the red lines. Most of them, other than that, are just wording changes, fixes like that. Any questions for staff?
All right.
Mr.
Thanks.
Chairman, could I add one more thing to?
Yes, please, Mr. Hager.
Mr. Hall's wonderful presentation. This ordinance, if it is adopted by the City Council, would take effect February 1st, 2024. So just for information, that's when, it wouldn't take effect immediately. We do have a bit of a grace period there to work out our checklists and other things, but that's when it is required to take effect
Statutory
by
deadline?
law.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other further questions? Yes, Commissioner
I have one more
Goches.
question, sorry. I just didn't see a recommendation by the fire department. Were they required to review this or not?
They were intimately involved in all of these reviews, yeah.
I would assume so.
And
but-
especially with the flag lot, but with the other things as well. Subdivision is a challenge for fire departments, and we always involve them in those discussions, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, it's a good question.
Luckily, we have a firefighter on this commission too, so we're good. All right, this item does require a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for this particular item tonight. If you would, please approach the podium, write your name for the record, and state your name for the audible record. Yes, please.
Not necessarily a comment, but a question maybe, because I'm a flag lot owner.
Yeah, will you state your name, please?
Sure, Kelly White.
White, okay.
So would this lead to an issue of, let's say you've got multiple lots with the flag lots, is this going to create like a rush to the recorder's office to, if only 2 of them can be, use this new subdivision code, is it then going to create like, well, we got to the subdivision first and, the neighbors are out of luck just because we got there first? I don't know, just a thought,
Yeah,
as a
you go.
flag owner.
Please write your name there. Thank you, Mr. White, appreciate it.
Just curiosity.
Do you want me to address that the best that I can? Yes and no. A rush, no, because property owners approach us when they're ready to subdivide, and we would have to evaluate whether they're able to or not at that time. So it's not like we're going to, it's just going to come up organically as it happens. And I would say it's not an uncommon requirement in cities. I've looked at a lot of flag lot codes, and contiguity is a concern for a lot of ordinances. It's far from the most important part of this code change, but it's not having a contiguity requirement or an adjacency regulation is one of only several different concerns that come up with subdivision. There are water rights issues, there are access issues, there are improvements issues, there are just hosts of other issues as well. So in terms of it keeping people from subdividing, no, flag lots come up very rarely. They're only supposed to be used when there's just literally no other way to get access to the back portion of a property. So I wouldn't view it as a problem for a lot of people.
Perfect. All right, public comment is still open. If there's anybody else who would still like to approach. All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this particular item, bring it back to the commission for any other further questions. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Yes, please, Commissioner Proctor.
I move we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for Ordinance 2023-43, amending Tooele City Code Chapter 7-19 regarding subdivisions based on the staff's report and all the work that everybody did.
All right, got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Proctor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Hammer. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I'm Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. Moves us on to number 6 on our agenda tonight, is a public hearing and recommendation. It's a consideration of proposed amendments to the multifamily residential design guidelines as found in Tooele City Code 7-11A-18, 7-11A-12, and 7-11A-25. Mr. Agard. Whew, I know.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
I need to breathe now.
I don't know why it is, but our December meetings always have heavy agendas.
We haven't been here for a month.
Tonight's a doozy for you. You may recall that we've had some developers challenging our design standards, especially as it relates to exterior building materials. And ultimately, the request for deviation was ultimately denied for good reason by the City Council. The City Council also instructed me at the time to put together some alternatives in regards to our building materials, more particularly the exterior building materials that are required for multifamily housing. And I did just that. And I took the amendments to the City Council on their November 11th work session and received some feedback from them. And they instructed me at that time to move this ordinance through the public process. So I tweaked what I had originally written up, and it is now in the public process for recommendation from the Planning Commission. This is a legislative item which must be approved by the city's legislature, the City Council. However, the Planning Commission can make recommendations on what they'd like to see the ordinance and how it should be tailored. So you wouldn't need to do any conditions, but you can forward any recommendation you'd like to the City Council regarding what you think the ordinance should say or what it should not say. So you'll note that there are 3 sections that we're going to be looking at here. One of them is the building materials. The other one is landscaping, the other one is deviation from design standards. I thought that since we're going to be diving into 7-11A, I might as well lump these in there at the same time and hash them all out at once, because I believe there are changes that do need to happen. So in regards to current exterior materials requirement, we currently require 50% of total building exterior to be brick or stone, with the front facade having 60% brick or stone. The remaining exterior walls can be either brick, stone, stucco, clapboard, wood, block, and or vinyl. In looking at formulating a new ordinance and working with the City Council on this, what I'm proposing in this ordinance is that we reduce the amount of brick or stone to 40% for front and public street-facing facades. And the reasoning behind that is those are the facades that are visible. And so citizens that are driving by, they're going to be seeing those facades. And originally I was looking at 20% brick or stone, and the City Council wanted to see a little bit more, and I support that. In my studies in looking into this ordinance and throwing together numbers, I did a study on the cost of materials and the cost of labor to install certain materials on the home. And if we reduce the amount of brick or stone, there would be a slight reduction in the cost of materials and possibly labor for a townhouse. But it wouldn't be significant enough to really render a unit suddenly affordable to the average household Utah income. By my estimates and by my calculations, it may reduce the cost of materials and labor by about $15,000. So if you're looking at a $500,000 townhouse, it's not really going to do a whole lot in regards to making that house suddenly affordable. However, it does help bring the cost down a little bit. So the city is trying to help out as much as it can there. So my proposal is 40% of front and public street facing facades should be brick or stone. And then remaining facades not requiring brick or stone shall include at least 2 of the materials on an expanded list. So the list will be expanded to stucco, clapboard, board and batten, wood, masonry, block, vinyl, metal panels, tile, aluminum, shake, terracotta, and composite materials. Those are exterior materials that are growing in popularity throughout the building community, and they could be easily utilized on many of our townhomes and apartment building exteriors. And then another requirement that's being added to the ordinance is no more than 70% of facades not requiring brick or stone shall be covered by one of these materials. So they need to have 2 of those materials on facades not requiring brick or stone, but one material can't cover more than 70% of that. And the reason there is we want to make sure that they use alternative materials on their facades. We don't want to have one big row of townhouses all with vinyl siding and a little bit of brick. So the purpose of that is to try and encourage architects to utilize multiple materials in their design. And then another additional requirement that came at the behest of the City Council is that each townhouse facade shall include a portion of the required 40% brick or stone. So each townhouse has to have brick or stone on it. So they couldn't go along and put all their brick on one unit and then do the rest as vinyl siding. I sought out some renderings of townhomes and apartment buildings, and I believe that these would accurately represent what this ordinance would require. This townhouse has approximately 40 to 50% brick on it. You'll notice that one unit has a little more brick on it than the others, and then the upper walls have either fiber cement siding, and there's some board and batten siding as well. Another elevation showing how the brick could be spaced throughout the units. I did not include a requirement for the amount of brick on each unit. So, and the reason for that is to provide some variety to the units. So one may have more brick, one may have a little bit less brick, and give the architect some tools to design these units. Here's another one. You'll notice the unit in the middle has a very small wainscot of brick, and then the end unit has quite a bit more. So again, one unit has brick on it, but there's no limit specified. And then here's another one. One of the units is entirely brick, and then all the other units do have brick, but some of them have less amount than others. So those are the proposals for the exterior building materials requirement. As I mentioned, you are free to make whatever recommendation you'd like to the City Council. And here's another one. It's pretty similar to what you've already seen. The next ordinance, or the next section of the multifamily residential design guidelines relates to the current tree and shrub requirement. After spending about 5 years as a city planner, I have been waiting to sink my fingers into this one because the current ordinance that we have is confusing, cumbersome, and it just doesn't work. Right now, the way that we calculate our trees, when I get an application for a multifamily residential development, I have to count the building sections. A section is defined by space between an entry and the edge of the building, or space between the entrances, or the number of units behind a facade if there's not any entrances. And then I take those building sections, and the trees are based upon what those sections are adjacent to. So if a section is next to a street, an arterial street, there's a tree requirement. If it's next to a local class street, there's another tree requirement. If a section is next to open space, there's a different requirement. If it's between a building, there's a different requirement. And over the years, as we've used this code, it has resulted in frequent disagreements between staff and developers in regards to what the actual tree requirement is. It also ends up putting trees in places where the tree just can't grow. Places that are perpetually shaded, or they just don't thrive, and it's just a waste of a tree. And so I'm proposing a simplification to the code. Number one, to help developers in regards to meeting the qualifications of the code. Number two, to help Jared as he's reviewing site plans so that the review becomes simpler. I'm proposing we just have a 20 tree per acre requirement. If you develop 1 acre, you're putting in 20 trees. If you're developing 1 acre, you're putting in 50 shrubs. 40% of required trees should be planted within 100 feet of any public right-of-way. So I want at least 40% of those trees closer to the street. Park strip trees can count into that number. 40% of required trees should be located in or adjacent to common areas with a dedicated recreational purpose. Again, we want trees where they're going to be beneficial, around picnic areas, soccer fields, and so forth. And then we want to have a 60-40 ratio of deciduous and coniferous tree varieties to provide some green and color during the winter months. And then a minimum depth of 5 feet for shrub planting beds adjacent to building foundations, and then the usual requirement that all trees and shrubs shall be irrigated by a drip or bubbler type irrigation system. And then the last section of multifamily residential design guidelines relates to the design deviation section. Right now, under the code, when somebody wants to request a deviation, and you recently handled one of these, the applicant is required to present the justification for the design deviation. The deviation must also meet minimum criteria in order to qualify, and ultimately the City Council shall find that the deviation request meets minimum findings. This ordinance is very cumbersome. It's hard to interpret. And given the difficulties we encountered with the last deviation request, it just didn't work. And what I'm proposing, staff, is that we just eliminate this section from the code entirely. And the reasons I'm suggesting that is, if we establish design standards, why do we want to provide an avenue for people to deviate from them? It's just, in my opinion, it's an unnecessary code. I don't know why it's in there. It was actually put in there after I started here, and I don't entirely know why. But those are the amendments I'm proposing for the multifamily residential design guidelines. I'm open to any suggestions you might have, and feel free to make any recommendations you'd like to see in regards to this code, these code changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments.
I have one.
Yes, Commissioner
Does
Proctor.
the trees and the shrubs, does that come from a list that is provided? So they're not putting an oak tree in a park strip?
Yes, we do have a recommended tree species list.
Okay.
That was, or that is currently being provided. And
Didn't you just update that not too long ago?
we did just update that, yeah, probably, I'm thinking September. But we do have a list of tree species that will thrive in Tooele City's climate and soil conditions and everything. And the ordinance does actually have language in there. I didn't include that in my slide, but it does have language in there that those trees shall be from that selection.
Good question. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Goches.
I just kind of have a comment. I don't know if it's really relevant, but when Mr. Ackerlow requested a change in the facade and the design standard in Overlake, that was less than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've already reduced the facade requirements. So is this a considerable reduction to what we had, the 40%? What was the requirement at that time when we've reduced it?
Yeah, when Mr. Ackerlow did his request, the ordinance at the time required 75% of the 50% of total stone and brick to be on the front facade.
Okay.
And the problem he was having is if he did that, the entire facade was going to be brick. And so at that time, we reduced it down to 60% on the front facade. But the ordinance at the time still required all 4 facades to have the brick and stone. So what this amendment is proposing is a reduction of 40% on only the highly visible facades. So it is a reduction. But our hope is that with the additional materials that are available and now permissible, or that will be permissible if this code is adopted, that we can still maintain the architectural integrity of the structures.
Okay. Just another comment, if I might. When that landowner or property owner came to us that is proposing their development up by the Gopher, they asked for a deviation because they said that they couldn't, financially pencil it out. Well, that property sold and it's going forward, and we hadn't made the change. So I'm wondering, is this really necessary?
Well, that's a decision that you guys and the city council need to make. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's not going to render homes affordable. It's not. It may reduce the price down a little bit, but the average household income in the state of Utah, it's not going to make it affordable for them.
On a fourplex, it's about $25 a month in your payment.
Yep.
Just off the top of my head.
And if I could point out as well, like in the previous deviation request that you entertained, they were claiming that it also created unfair competition between the project at Western Acres, where they have a PUD and they were alleviated from that stone requirement. D.R. Horton is now putting stone on those buildings, even though they don't have to. So,
D.R. Horton come to us too. Or
is it really necessary?
didn't let him-
I don't know. I don't think it's going to make houses affordable.
And, I just know that in the era that they had, what they established as the pretty codes, they were more than just making things, pleasing, aesthetically pleasing. It was, just to make homes so that they don't, siding blow off in the wind and have, other things that happen when you use a different type of material that's not as durable as a stone or a brick. So, there was a reason why we implemented that to begin with. So we had pretty codes with what we considered to be a good design standard. We did reduce it, and it has worked. That other developer did sell his property, and so that's not holding them up. So in my opinion, I don't know that it's necessary. And I'm sure you've gone to a lot of work to review this at the request of the city council. I can appreciate that.
And, I can't speak exactly for the city council, and Councilwoman Manzioni can probably address that better than me. I think we're just trying to be good neighbors. We're just trying to find a comfortable spot here that maintains the city's architectural integrity and helps developers a little bit. I think that's the main focus behind the exterior materials requirement.
And then along with that, I think we need to be a good steward and a good neighbor to the residents that are around us, that we don't want to cheapen our code, our neighbors, our neighborhoods by what's next door. I don't know for sure if that's going to make a real big difference to them, but we want all of our neighbors to be happy with the developments that are coming in next to them as well, and not feel like, well, they didn't require as much. And then every time we change a code, we are going to live with this, for a long time. It'll take a lot to be able to change it to increase the code. So
Yes.
I don't know if I'll be voting favorably for it just because of those reasons I stated.
Commissioner Sloan?
A couple of things that Commissioner Goach just brought up that I think, as I remember the time, and frankly, you're probably in a better position than I am to remember what materials were available at the time of the pretty codes. I like the new list. I like the additions of the hardy board and the board of batten. Those things weren't necessarily readily available back in that time. So I'm a little more comfortable that we're not going to see the stuff flying off the houses like we did that set the pretty codes in motion. The second thing, and I know they hate it when we call them pretty codes, the minimum building standards. The second thing, to your last comment, we may or may not have to live with them for a long time. This is multifamily only. The state already took away the pretty codes for single-family housing.
They did.
It won't shock me at all if they do exactly the same thing on multifamily if it occurs to them. So I'm comfortable with the changes. I'm certainly not a fan of increasing the cost to build. I don't know that we, like you said, I don't know that we've made a huge dent in that. This isn't, I stood in this room 15 years ago and yelled at the current that serving planning commission at the time that they were destroying affordable housing at that time with the pretty codes. And whether that was right or wrong at the time, it did what they wanted it to do. And I think this one just actually makes it a nicer product without doing the damage that the initial pretty codes did. The hit that we took when those first came out per house was way more than the 15,000 you're talking about in this particular case. And I like the new materials.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Marisa, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Well, maybe I do. So the delineation between the 20% that Mr. Agard originally came to the city council with, and he said that you guys felt a little bit comfortable with more. If we were to reduce it down to 20%, doesn't that make a little bit more of a difference from making affordable housing affordable and thereby help a little bit more with the mandate of trying to find that in the city? And if so, I guess, what was the general mindset of the council? If you're comfortable speaking to that, if not, you can just speak for yourself. Between 20 and 60 and why 40 was kind of middle ground.
I will speak for myself.
Okay,
and
that's
my
fine.
Perception. I believe that when he had the 20%, he also had 3 materials. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I personally was okay with that, with the 3 materials and the 20. The majority of the council was not. So it wasn't a unanimous, well, we didn't vote because it was in a work meeting, but it seemed as if there was not a unanimous vote in the room. I think they just felt like the change between 20 and 40 doesn't save much money. So it's not really a significant difference in cost based on the numbers that Andrew provided us in the council meeting. We really wanted to expand the palette, really. I can think of 5 people who have come to request, or at least propose that they were going to request a deviation.
Okay.
And most of it was because there are so many more materials now that were not available when the code was initially written. So it's really, for me, more about expanding the palette and having some variety in what is on a building versus just all vinyl, I guess. Vinyl doesn't hold up well, you can see it blow off in the wind. So that was the main discussion. And then I think it was, Andrew can correct me if he thinks something different, but it seemed just a personal preference, the 40 versus 20.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
And so when we increased it back to 40, I think we then said 2 other materials instead of 3.
Okay.
Am I remembering right?
Spot on. Yep.
Okay, that helps me I'm trying to form what I really think, and listening to Commissioner Gochas, who raises some good points, and Commissioner Sloan raises some good points, and I just wanted to kind of get a council perspective, because to me, I like the 60%, but I also like opening up the palette more. And so I would rather just see the 60 stay and just have a lot more options there available. That's my own personal preference. That being said, it's not a deal breaker for me to go down to 40. Anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess. Thanks, Marisa, for answering that.
Good questions. That's good discussion. Any other questions or comments? All right. This one also does require a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this particular item. You guys know the drill.
Hi, my name is Ivan Carroll. Sorry, I don't live in Tooele, so apologies for taking some time. I am a multifamily developer, though I'm here for the Harris item that'll be coming up later. But I will say, when we were working with Andrew, when he was in his previous position, you could tell he paid a lot of attention to the details. It's fantastic to work with. And I will say, it seems like you've given a ton of thought to this, Andrew, which I appreciate. As a developer, and also as somebody who works really closely with architects trying to design something that will fit in great with the community that it's in and last for a long time, I am a big proponent of the way that you tried to cover up all the loopholes that somebody trying to save a bunch of money but just make the quickest lipstick job they can do. I do think adding all the extra materials is a fantastic option. There's a lot of, I think Commissioner Sloan mentioned, a lot of materials that weren't available before when these codes were written. There's a lot of materials like metal and composite panels that sometimes get pushed aside a little bit, but actually work really well in a lot of designs today, along with the fiber cement, things like that. I will say I do wonder about the number of trees and shrubs. For example, the Harris project, I pulled up the plans just to count real quick. I think we have something around 70-ish trees there. We developed about 5 acres, so we'd be short about 30 trees. And I feel like we have a ton of trees. So just wondering, for smaller or larger parcels, if that number needs to flex or not. Big proponent of having a lot of trees, so if it stays, I'm sure there can be a way to work it around. And then deviations, I agree, the way the code was written for the deviations seemed like a circular no. Like you're already not meeting the minimums, but you have to meet the minimums to get a deviation. So either striking it or rewording it. I would say that deviations can be helpful, but if the city's going to allow them, the city should use them to get something as well. Affordability, public amenities, like something. So if you're going to have a deviation code, use it to get developers like me to provide something that benefits the city or the community as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Those are good points. Seeing no one else approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission for further questions or comments.
Well, now I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Hammer.
Andrew, would you entertain adding the deviation back in with, I love what Mr. Carroll mentioned, to get something from the developer. I mean, that's what we want, right? Walking trails and parks and all those things that sometimes they come in and they want, and they don't give us anything. I love that idea.
If ultimately that's where the planning commission recommends and the city council directs me to go, I'd have to take some time to formulate some new language, because I haven't given a whole lot of thought to rewriting the deviation code, just striking it all together. So I'd have to rework that. But if that's the way ultimately I'm directed, I'm happy to do so.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment.
Yes, Commissioner Goches.
I agree with adding more options to the 60%, not reducing. So I would be favorable to making that addition, because I do think that there are durable products out there that aren't going to turn a neighborhood into Tornado Alley, where you go down the street and there's been a big windstorm and you see siding torn off the houses. I think that there are good quality products, but that we also want to maintain a quality neighborhood and be aesthetically pleasing. Thank you.
All right, anything else from the commission? I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Proctor.
I move we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the Tooele City Multifamily Residential Design Guideline Text Amendment request by Tooele City for the purpose of revising the city codes regarding exterior material requirements, landscaping requirements, and multifamily residential developments, and eliminating the deviation standards from the ordinance. So basically as written.
Okay, I got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Proctor. Pretty much straight up as it's written. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Jensen. Any discussion on this before we move it forward?
I just believe that, as Commissioner Sloan mentioned, we probably won't live as long because the state will probably take that away too.
And I think that our discussion has been well received by City Council so far. So she understands our intent to this and what we're looking for. So if there's anything else you want to add to that motion, we can add it now.
Just a discussion?
Yes.
I liked Commissioner Hammer's recommendation to change the way the deviation process works. I think that could be a benefit, and so striking it, I don't believe is helping us in any way. It just makes it easier for the developer. So I think that if we did rewrite the deviation code, it may be a benefit to us. So I liked that.
Liking that certain aspect, yeah. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Nay.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Nay.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I think City Council has heard everything we've discussed and kind of know the direction along with Mr. Agard, so I'm going to vote yay on this one. Move it forward and let the City Council figure out the rest of it. It'll be on them anyway. So that one moves forward with a positive recommendation to the City Council. Moving 5-2, if you guys needed to know that for the record. Number 7 on our agenda here tonight is a public hearing and recommendation. It's consideration of proposed amendments to the Tooele City Annexation Policy Plan, an element of the Tooele City General Plan, and Mr. Agard will be presenting to us tonight.
I've got another fun one for you tonight. You're going to get tired of hearing me talk. So, the Annexation Policy Plan. What is it and why do we have one? The Annexation Policy Plan is an element of the Tooele City General Plan that identifies areas outside of but adjacent to the city's incorporated boundaries that may be considered for annexation. And I emphasize the word considered. The Annexation Policy Plan is a required element. It is required by the Utah state law. And so that's why we have one in there, is to address possible annexations in the future. What does an annexation policy plan not do? It does not in any way, shape, or form obligate the city council to annex property, to provide services to that property, or to produce studies to justify the city's denial of any annexation. The purpose of an annexation policy plan is simply to authorize the ability to consider annexing land. So why are we here looking at our annexation policy plan? The city administration has asked me to do this, and as time passes, conditions within and surrounding a city change and evolve. And because of these changes and evolutions, it's wise for us to revisit our annexation policy plan. This is our current annexation policy plan, and the areas are divided into areas A through H, I believe, and they are indicated by various colors on the map. This map was originally approved in 2019, but it was also amended and adopted in 2020 when Grantsville City did some additional annexations up to the city's northwestern boundary. So how have conditions changed? Number one, URTA has incorporated as a city, and it now has its own jurisdictional authority over a lot of the properties that were originally in our annexation policy plan. So in order for the city to even consider annexing property like that, it would have to first de-annex from Urda City and then go through the annexation process. That is a process you don't see very often. I've seen it one time in my 21 years as a planner, and that was when a section of Bluffdale de-annexed from Bluffdale City and then annexed into Harriman City. And it was a long, ugly legal battle. So it's probably not something that we're ever going to see out here. Number two, as I mentioned, Grantsville expanded its boundaries. And then number three, probably the most critical, is water has become increasingly difficult to find to satisfy the needs of new development. So, looking at our annexation policy plan, this is what I call the jurisdiction boundary map. Grantsville's in gray, Urda City's in red, and then Pine Canyon Township's in blue. The dark red areas are now part of Urda City, and so they just no longer qualify for annexation because they're part of Urda. And then the green areas are currently unincorporated areas. They do not belong in any jurisdiction, but they are adjacent to Tooele City. And then this is the southern portion of the city. You'll note the red areas are areas that are in our plan that are currently under other jurisdictions. Tooele Army Depot occupies the little red piece to the north. Highly unlikely the federal government's ever going to break that loose. They do occasionally do that with their bases, but it's just not very common. And then Pine Canyon Township, although Pine Canyon Township is an unincorporated area, it does have its own jurisdictional authority. It has its own planning commission, has its own zoning control. So a large section, a large chunk of that area to the east of the city is located within the Pine Canyon Township. So let's look at...
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Could you go back to that map?
Mhm.
And then again, tell us the red areas?
The red areas are, number one, those are areas that are now located within another jurisdiction. So we have the area in the Tooele Army Depot. That's the little piece on the northwest corner. And then on the east side, we have some of the property that's located within the Pine Canyon Township.
So what's east of this Milter Road on the Business property? Who has jurisdiction over that?
That would be Tooele County.
Sorry, it's south. Okay, so
South of Smelter Road, east of the city, that's unincorporated Tooele County. So right now, Tooele County has jurisdiction.
okay.
So let's analyze these areas quickly and where we're going with this annexation policy plan. Area D and Area K are areas that are unincorporated but located within Pine Canyon. And there are also areas that are unincorporated and located within Tooele City. One of the greatest reasons in regards to removing these areas from the annexation policy plan is water and sewer resources. And I'll get to this later on in my presentation, but currently it's getting increasingly difficult to provide water resources to areas within our city, much less expanding our boundaries for new areas. The areas on the west, Area E is located down around SR 36 and south of the county jail. Most of that is located in undevelopable areas because of slopes, large geological issues. Area G is located way to the southeast. There's no sewer, there's no water there, and the incredible cost to get sewer and water to those areas. Again, the small area to the north, Area F, that's located in the U.S. Army Depot. There is a little wedge-shaped piece located right in the middle of the city. That's a good candidate for annexation. It's surrounded by the city, the resources, we could provide the necessary resources to develop that area if it ever were to annex. So in looking at this annexation policy plan, I also undertook the task of doing a study in regards to how much available land is located within Tooele City for residential development. This includes undeveloped land as well as underdeveloped land. And when referring to underdeveloped, that means that there may be a house on the property, but you've got 2 or 3 acres behind it that's just sitting there either fallowing or being utilized as agricultural land. Marissa Snyder in the Public Works Department worked hard to put this map together. The blue areas indicate 3,077 acres of undeveloped residential land. That is land that is currently zoned residential and could see residential develop. So if one of these property owners develops, and if they find the water rights, they bring those water rights to the city, and we're obligated to provide the water for them. There's also an estimate of 465 acres of underdeveloped land, and that's illustrated in purple. This is land that has a home on it, but could potentially break loose with some of the extra land and develop there. This is not all the property that could develop in the city. There's also a lot of industrial and commercial land within our boundaries that is going to require water resources and so forth. So the administration and I are recommending that the annexation policy plan at this time be amended, removing all the areas except for Area A as shown on the map. And that could change in the future as conditions change, as water resources improve. But that's our recommendation for the annexation policy plan. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Goches?
Questions. You know, when the LDS Church proposed to build a temple down in Erda, that was going to require municipal services. And so at that time, the church requested annexation into Tooele City. There were 13 landowners that requested annexation that extended from north of Tooele City down to the Motor View, across the street to Church Road in Erda. It was a large swath of land. I don't see how can we justify closing the door to people who are interested in annexation that can meet the requirements of providing water and meeting the different requirements. I think there are 7 steps that you have to legally provide for. So we're essentially going to landlock Tooele City and say that nobody can annex any property in except for that little teeny area. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's what city administration and staff are recommending at this time. Annexation policy plans can always be amended. So if there is a situation where a property does come available and it has the resources it can provide, we can easily amend the annexation policy plan to include that property and facilitate the consideration for annexation. So these plans aren't final. One of the big issues we're encountering with the annexation policy plan as it currently is if it's identified on the map, it is often construed that it's automatically going to be annexed. And that's not the message we want to try to convey at this point in time.
What is the north boundary stopping point? Because it's kind of a small little map and I couldn't tell that.
This map?
Okay. What, I can see where Erda has incorporated and SR 36 and Tooele City, but just kind of describe to me how far down we're going. Say, you know, we've got the North Point Medical, we've got the old bargain buggies. What's past that? On this map?
So the map indicates the current boundaries of Tooele City against Erda City.
Okay, so that's...
So everything that's in red is Erda City.
So kind of that round horseshoe that's to the west of, no, okay, I'm really not, okay, show me where's Main Street.
The green line.
The green line is Main Street, okay.
Yep.
So we're going down to Tooele Valley trailers or whatever.
So the boundary to the north, it jogs. So the trailer shop is pretty much the northern boundary on the west side of SR 36. Mm-hmm. On the east side, it goes down a little bit north of Lydiard's. There's about, I'd say, 50 acres north of Lydiard's, and then the Erda City boundary. So there's a large jog there between the two areas.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Robinson.
Could I All right, I'm going to make a comment. And of all the years I've been on this commission, I've said numerous times how I'm a big fan of Manifest Destiny. And this just blows Manifest Destiny out of the water. We just went through a big thing with one of these areas possibly getting annexed into the city that was years long. And it came down to one vote essentially in the city council. And now we want to flip this, it seems like, because of maybe something happening where it did get annexed. I don't understand. The process seemed to work really, really well. And so I see no need to make a change after just 3 years where the possibilities still exist now. I understand that we could change it again in another 3 years, but in my view, not enough has changed to warrant removing everything, especially when we have a process in place that seemed to work exactly how it was laid out to work. And so I'm a big no on this.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment, there are some of these that are just a slam dunk. Obviously, if we don't have jurisdiction, they shouldn't be on our annexation plan. And that's the only thing that's changed, I think, in the timeframe you and I are talking about, that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, if somebody comes to us that has the desire and the wherewithal to meet the criteria, I'm not a fan of blocking them out and adding, you say they can easily, and I appreciate the verbiage specifically. There isn't anything easy about it, and it's by design. It's supposed to be a tough hill to climb, and it already obviously is. We just watched it, as you indicated. It is a tough hill to climb, and I'm not sure that adding an additional step solves the problem other than one of time. So again, I'm in support of just about everything on here, but there are two areas that I do have concern over. And Area K and Area D, to me, don't make a lot of sense. I would frankly like to see Area K stay in the plan and extend farther north up to the URDA boundary. You know, my attitude on our growth is not a secret to anyone, but I'm also in support of, you know, our policy is in place and it's working.
All right, any other further questions?
Andrew, would you go back to the map that's marked with KA, you know, so that we can kind of see see the areas that Chris was talking about?
This one?
Okay.
Area K is the one that went through the process. That got denied by
K's just went through it.
But my understanding again is that that's all unincorporated area outside of the Carfork subdivision directly to the north of it. My understanding is that's all unincorporated up to the URDA border. And then, you know, same thing again, that's, as you mentioned to Commissioner Gochis, most of Area D, which is already on the plan. Again, that's something that a property owner might want to take a flyer at. And again, if they have the wherewithal and the plan to make it work and they can hit all of the steps that are currently in the ordinance, I'm not sure why we would want to preclude that. I mean, I understand the genesis of this plan, but those two areas I don't agree with.
Any other further discussion or questions from the commission for staff? All right, thank you, Mr. Agard. This one does require a public hearing as well, so I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any other further questions or comments. I'll entertain a motion on this item. Remember, this is a recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
of the City
I'll
Council.
move we forward a negative recommendation to the City Council.
Okay.
I'll
A mo-
second that.
A motion from Commissioner Robinson for a negative recommendation and a second from Commissioner Goches. Any discussion before we move forward? All right. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Nay.
Commissioner Proctor?
Nay.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I see how you guys are.
Here for you, Mr. Chair.
It's just a recommendation.
Can I quit? You fire me? I do also think this needs a little bit more work. I do believe that leaving K and D in there could be potentials for us in the future. This is a recommendation, so I'm going to go ahead and vote yay on this one. This one passes with a negative recommendation to the City Council with the current wording 4-3. All right, any other discussion, comments or questions?
Wasn't it, is it 5-2?
It was 5-2, wasn't it?
Yeah. Weston voted aye, 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 nay, nay.
Okay, you're right.
You didn't break the tie. You want to change your vote now?
No, we're good. We're good.
Pressure got to your math skills, I can see.
My math skills. It's been a long night already.
We're not used to this.
And our new planning guy loaded our agenda.
I think in this case, the city council got the gist of
Yeah,
what we're
that's
trying to
kind of what, the recommendation, we're making a recommendation, and Councilwoman Manzione's here listening too, so she understands our intent behind it, so. Good, good. There's a recording available too for our city council to listen to. All right, moves us on to number 8 on our agenda tonight is a review and recommendation. This is a consideration of request by Melissa Jensen representing Harris Community Village LLC for preliminary approval of the proposed Harris Community Village condominium subdivision located at 251 North First Street in the MR8 zoning district. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. As you said, this is a request for condominium subdivision approval. A lot of times condominium subdivisions have to do with 78 or 92 units within a building or something like that. This is not the case. This is subdividing a condominium, creating a condominium subdivision for 3 buildings on the Harris Community Village site. And again, just as a review, condominium subdivision will create ownership possibilities for the buildings themselves separately, and then common ownership between for the landscaping, the parking, the accesses, et cetera. This is to show you the larger zoning. It's in the MR8 zone. It is surrounded entirely by R17 zoning, but this is a site that is in construction right now. The 3 buildings involved are labeled A, B, and C. They would all be able to be owned separately. You can see the common area is all held commonly within that white color. Then the striping indicates the A, B, and C buildings that can be owned individually. And then there is some limited common as well that creates this area that's drainage, retention area, and then there's an access easement that runs through the property that way that will be held between the 3 and for public utility easement access for emergency services, plows, et cetera, on the property. These buildings are, as I said, already in existence. A and B are just over 9,000 square feet, or sorry, just under 9,000 square feet each, and building C, the largest, is just over 27,000 square feet. The rest of the land is held in common. There's just a shot looking across First Street at them. You can see A and B back here, and then building C in the front with that angle on it. The Planning Commission is, at this point, you're still the recommending body for subdivisions like this. City Council would have to hear this as well and approve the preliminary subdivision, and then staff will work out for final and get approvals. Do you have any questions about this at this time? Sorry, anything else I can tell you? It's a relatively simple, the subdivision process for condominiums is not simple, but the public process, it doesn't have to involve reading through all the CCNRs and the condo deck and all of those things. We have all those documents, everything's in order to move on. A lot of work has been, as we talked about before, front-loaded on this preliminary process. So anything else I can tell you about this particular project?
Commissioner Goches?
Thanks. Jared, the comment that you made about being privately owned, I thought this entire project was owned by one entity. So are you saying that somebody could own A and be a separate owner than who owns the major building,
That is
building C?
That is the purpose, that they could have separate ownerships. I'll let the applicants speak to that probably better than I could, but there's a million different reasons that they may want to be able to do that.
Okay.
For funding, usually it's in these kinds of cases with public-private partnerships, it's for funding. So I don't know that that's the case. They would have to answer that for you, but it would create the ability for a different entity to own A or B or C. They'd all still be tied together in that condominium association.
If I remember correctly, we visited this before, and in order for it to be a condominium, we needed to do it this way. Is that correct?
That's right.
Just for people to
have
live
different
there.
ownership, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we did it for Douglas not too long ago.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it's not uncommon for entities like this to want condominium ownership, and then they may still retain all of the ownership, but in slightly different forms, or be able to move funding around in different ways.
And does the city have the ability to require HOA? Is it a?
Yeah, associations are required. You can't own this, all of this land that's held in common can't be held in common without those associations. So they couldn't do it without that declaration of condo and the association.
Okay.
You can't landlock those properties.
But good question, thank you.
Any other further questions or discussion for staff?
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. This one does not require a public hearing, but I do see the applicant in the room. Would you like to address us tonight, Ms. Jensen?
It's Miss Christie.
Miss
It's Miss Christie Hansen, but.
Christie Hansen, sorry. Just read the name on the paper.
I'm
My
Deanne
apologies.
Christiansen with Tooele County Housing Authority. And we are the owners of Harris Community Village, and we intend to continue to be the owners of Harris Community Village. The only reason we came before the Planning and City Council for the condominium plat is because of our financing. We have low-income housing tax credits in which our investor is giving us $20 million, and they needed it to be this way. They required it in order to give us their money. So that's the only reason that we came before this council to change it, so.
Thank you, Ms. Christiansen.
Thank you.
Apologize for that.
I'm not in a hurry, so I don't have to write my name, right?
All right, we'll bring this back to the commission for further questions.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, we walked through the Building C as a fire department maybe about a month ago, and they've done a great job. It
That's
looks
awesome.
really good in there. You guys have done great, so.
You weren't in there licking the walls, were you?
What's that?
You weren't in there licking the walls, were you?
Not since I was a little kid.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they pulled all that stuff out. Now it's still safe.
It's good. It'd be safe for us anyway. We're from Tooele. All right, I'll entertain a motion on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the Harris Community Village condominium plat, requested by Melissa Jensen, representing Harris Community Village LLC, based on the findings subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated December 8, 2023.
I got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Sloan. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
A second from Commissioner Robinson. Any discussion before we move forward? Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. This one passes with a positive recommendation headed up to the City Council. Number 9 on our agenda tonight is a review and recommendation for consideration of request by Jared Payne, representing Mountain Partner Investments, for preliminary approval of the Millennial Park subdivision located at 300 West, 400 North in the MR16 multifamily residential zone. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary subdivision plan is proposed for the 1.7 acre parcel highlighted in red on the aerial photograph. It is just north of 400 North, west of 250 West, with the Dow James Park located to the west, as well as Millennial Park Phase 1, which you can see on the aerial photograph is currently under construction. I believe one of the structures is now complete. This is for Phase 2 of Millennial Park. Property is currently zoned MR16 multifamily residential, 16 units per acre. As you can see, there are some MR16 zones to the north and to the west. To the north, we have a legally non-conforming mobile home park, and then, as I mentioned, Millennial Park Phase 1 to the west, with R17 and single-family zoning located to the south as well as to the east. This is the subdivision plan, the preliminary plan that the applicant is proposing. The lots are essentially the width of the townhomes. The MR16 zone does not have any requirements regarding lot size minimum or lot width minimum. This was designed to be this way to facilitate private ownership of townhomes. And so the subdivision as it is proposed with the lots does comply with the city's ordinances regarding lot sizes and lot widths. The subdivision plat does create common areas. There are parcels C and parcels B. Parcel B is an open landscaped area that will be utilized for recreational purposes. Parcel C is the private street. These areas will be maintained by the development HOA. And with that, staff's recommending approval of this preliminary plan subdivision with the basic conditions listed in your staff report. If you have any questions, happy to answer for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments. All right. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Proctor?
I move we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for Millennial Park Phase 2 preliminary subdivision plan request by Jared Payne, representing Mountain Partners Investment LLC, for the purpose of creating 24 townhouse-style residential lots, application number P22-1199, based on findings and subject to the conditions in the staff report dated December 4th, 2023.
All right, I've got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Proctor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Hammer. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes 7-0 with a positive recommendation to the City Council. Number 10 on our agenda tonight is a review and recommendation for consideration of a request by Kelly White and Landon Sandberg to amend the plat of the Kelly White subdivision located at 738 West McKellar Street in the MR8 multifamily residential area. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. This is actually a minor subdivision approval. It does amend a plat, but it's a minor subdivision approval for Kelly White at 738 West McKellar. Let me just show you real quickly the land that's involved. There are 2 lots involved, and we'll be amending one of these lots, proposed lot 101, and making it larger to accommodate a 6 dwelling unit structure that's there on the property. This is in the MR8 zone, so it'll allow the multifamily, but it needs to be a certain size. There's a size requirement, a density requirement that's not met by the current lot in that MR8 zone. The lot 101 proposed here would be made large enough to accommodate those 8 units. That would allow a zoning approval for building permits as those are applied for to make this, this building conform. The other lot involved retains all of the rest of that property, lot 102, and an easement, 30-foot easement between the 2 can be shared as a driveway. They're currently using that easement or that driveway as an access for both of the units or for both of the properties. That would remain and then be covered by that 30-foot shared access easement in this proposed minor subdivision. This is just a shot looking at the properties across McKellar Street at that 30-foot drive. Staff is recommending approval of the minor subdivision. It does give us a first step to take to make the other changes on the property that need to be made, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions. And this is just making that existing structure conforming, correct?
Correct, conforming to the zoning.
And we looked at this before, haven't we?
Yeah, this property.
I think multiple times.
Oh, yeah. So you're all more familiar with it than me, probably, at this point. Congratulations. That's good.
All right, any questions or comments for staff? And did you say this is a recommendation or approval?
This is an approval. You are, as the planning commission, you're the land use authority for minor subdivisions.
For another couple months?
For another month, yeah. If no other minor subdivision, we have one more coming back to you. Do it one more time that I know of before that change is made in February.
But this says recommendation still. right?
It
On
shouldn't.
the agenda?
It shouldn't.
On the
It
agenda, it
is-
says recommendation.
It does on the agenda, but this
Yeah.
is for approval, yes.
It is yours to approve.
That's why I had to
Sorry about
clarify
that.
that. Make
Thanks
sure
for the
you guys
clarification.
understood what you were voting for tonight.
No, I appreciate the clarification. I have several agenda mistakes.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We can get through it. All right, any other further questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Jensen?
I move we forward a recommendation of approval to the city council.
Yeah, you don't want to read that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Move we approve it.
It's yours.
I
It's
move we
your.
approve the,
Thank you.
that was the title.
I got a motion to approve this minor subdivision plat from Commissioner Jensen. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
A second from Commissioner Robinson. It's okay. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Hang on a second, Mr. Chair, I think we're having a conference.
We'll hold off on this vote, make sure we're good to go.
Thinking of something.
I'm sorry. So Andrew's letting me know. So minor subdivisions right now still do go to city council.
Okay.
And so it is a recommendation. I'm sorry about that. It is a
We're good.
recommendation.
Okay, so this is a
So we-
recommendation to the city council.
We
All
wanted
right.
to confuse you as much as possible with the subdivision changes that are going to bypass you as a body event. It'll go from being a in the new version, you won't be involved at all, and you'll never have to hear from me on these, period. So that'll be a blessing to everyone.
I like your style.
There
All
you
right.
go.
So with that having been said, it's just a recommendation. Commissioner Jensen, would you like to continue with your recommendation?
Yes, I recommend we forward a positive recommendation to city council.
Okay, Commissioner Robinson.
I'll still second it.
All right, we've got a first from Commissioner Jensen for
Got
recommendation.
to make sure we withdraw the first motion before it restates the second
Do
one.
we need to withdraw it? Okay, let's withdraw the first.
We'll withdraw my first motion.
Okay, Commissioner Jensen has withdrawn his first motion.
And I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I motion that we recommend a positive recommendation to city council.
Okay, we've got a positive recommendation from Commissioner Jensen. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And we have a second from Commissioner Robinson. Hopefully our minutes are all caught up and we're good to go. Yeah, she knows what to do. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Us over all our screw ups.
Aye, and I'm so glad it's just recommendation.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan? Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I'm Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes 7-0 as a positive recommendation heading up to the city council.
Thank you.
Moves us on to number 11 on our agenda tonight is a review and decision for consideration of request by Jared Payne representing Mountain Partner Investments for site plan and design review approval of the Millennial Park subdivision located at 300 West, 400 North in the MR16 zoning district. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a follow-up to the preliminary plan subdivision that was just recommended for approval. Same property, north of 400 North, 250 West, MR16 zoning. This is the site plan design review. This is an approval by the Planning Commission, not a recommendation. The site plan follows exactly the preliminary subdivision plan that was just presented. You will note that the units themselves are not the lots, but the lots actually incorporate the driveway as well as some private landscaping space. But the site plan matches the preliminary subdivision plan. The development proposes the construction of 4 buildings comprised of 6 townhomes. The parcel B, as I mentioned in the preliminary subdivision plan, is a landscaped open space area. There will be one amenity included in there, a child's play structure. The road within the development is a private road and will be maintained by the development HOA. These townhomes are considered rear-loaded, so the front typically will front onto the streets or into the interior parcel B, and then the entrance into the townhome, the driveway, is from the back. The landscaping plan has been reviewed according to the standards as found in the current ordinances for The multifamily residential design guidelines, and staff is confident that it does meet and exceed the minimum requirements for landscaping. The parcel B will be buffalo sod, with the rest being cobble, mulch, and drought-tolerant landscaping with the trees and shrubs placed as required by the current code to the best of our ability. As far as parking goes, each unit has a 2-car garage as well as a 20-foot deep driveway for a total of 4 parking stalls per unit. When this occurs under our current ordinances, there is no requirement for guest parking, so they have sufficient parking based upon the size of their garage and driveways. As far as architecture goes, this structure is almost the same, if not identical, to the one that was approved and already constructed on Phase 1. There will be 4 3-story units, with the end units being 2-story. There is a significant mix of materials, as well as horizontal and vertical articulation, both the roof line as well as balconies and so forth, on the front facade of the building. This is the rear facade of the building with the driveway, or with the garages, and then the side facades of the structure. Staff is confident the building as proposed meets our current standards for exterior building materials, and that the site plan and landscaping plan also comply with the design guidelines of Tooele City Code 7-11A, and we're recommending approval with the conditions listed in your staff report. If you have any questions, happy to answer them for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the site plan design review request by Jared Payne, representing Mountain Partner Investments for Millennial Park Phase 2, application number P22-1198, based on the findings and subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated December 7th, 2023.
Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Hammer. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Proctor. Any discussion before we move forward? Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one moves, that one is approved. Moves us on to number 12 on our agenda. Ms. Manzione.
Well, thank you. Lots of good discussion tonight. I don't have very much to share with you. Just a couple things. We had a very lovely discussion about sewer lift stations. So if you want to listen to the work meeting, that's a great conversation to be listened to. I did just want to mention that we did approve the mayor's reappointment of Melanie Hummer and John Proctor to the Planning Commission. Their terms were expired, so they've been reappointed, and the new appointment of Kelly Anderson
Hey, now I know.
to the Planning Commission. And then the City Council reappointed Matt Robinson, whose term was also up, so we
Did
reappointed.
you guys discuss that thoroughly?
We,
Not enough.
no. So I appreciate all of your willingness to be reappointed. And then we unfortunately increased the garbage can fees. So, sorry.
I don't necessarily agree that it was unfortunate. It hasn't been touched since.
It's
we
true.
started it.
Ever.
We're dipping into the fund now. So
Yeah. So I feel like we have a good plan going forward, that won't happen again. We have things more on a schedule so that we can look at those fees on a regular basis and make
I'm
sure.
glad you found it while we still have a positive balance in that account.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I don't recall it changed since I
Ever.
bought my first house.
Yeah,
No.
18 years ago.
Changed since they first come out with the cans.
right.
Great.
So that's all I have.
Thank
Unless you
you.
have anything for me.
Yes, any questions or comments for City Council?
Just thank you.
Yeah, up there, I think you've heard enough tonight.
Thank you. I took notes, so we'll share. I'll be happy to share.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here and helping us out. All right, moves us on to number 13 on our agenda, and I'll let Mr. Agard take over.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is the last meeting for 2023, and I just wanted to go over the year that we've had. The Planning Commission's been busy this year. You have approved 20 conditional use permits. You have recommended 9 land use map amendments. You've recommended 9 zoning map amendments. You've also recommended 10 ordinance amendments, including what was tonight, recommended 2 general plan amendments, and recommended 6 preliminary subdivision plans. You've approved 3 multifamily residential site plans, recommended 3 condo plats, granted 1 site plan extension, approved 1 design review, and reviewed 1 design deviation request. So it's been a busy year for the Planning Commission, and I appreciate each one of you and the work that you've done and the services that you provide to Tooele City. You're a valuable part to our development review process, and that we need you. So I'm glad that Commissioner Robinson, Commissioner Proctor, and Commissioner Hammer have signed up for another couple years. So it's good to have you. And then Commissioner Gochis is heading back to the City Council. So this will be her last time on the Planning Commission. We appreciate your service with the Commission.
Thank you.
And I look forward to working with you on the City Council.
Thank you.
This being the last meeting, we need to vote for a new chair and a new vice chair. And in regards to the Planning Commission bylaws, no member may serve more than 2 consecutive terms as chairperson. Commissioner Hamilton, I think this would be, you've been on 1 year, correctly? You were off for a year and then you came back on for a year. Alternate planning commissioners are not eligible for election as chair or vice chair, and there is no limit to the number of consecutive terms for a vice chair. So we are required to get this taken care of in the last meeting of the year. So you are free and clear to nominate and vote on a chair, and then nominate and vote on a vice chair. And I'll leave that to you.
I'd like to nominate Tyson Hamilton as the chair.
Well, she pulled the trigger on that quick.
Second.
I was going to nominate you.
I don't ever want to do that.
Oh, okay.
Then unless there's another nomination, I vote we close them and retain you by acclamation.
Anybody else want to make a nomination? Oh, man. You guys like putting up with me or what?
It's fine.
Okay, well, I guess we'll close the nominations then.
No, we just did by
By
acclamation.
acclamation.
Listen to my own emotion.
I guess I'm sitting here for another year, huh?
So did you nominate Commissioner Hamilton? We need to vote on that.
Do we have to vote we have to vote to say that we're not going to vote? That we're just going to accept you.
All right, so we'll entertain a motion on that then.
We don't just do it by acclamation. There were no other ways. You just do
You
it
can
by
make-
acclamation.
Yeah, that was part of the motion.
Okay, there's a motion to accept me as by acclamation. Is that the motion?
That's the motion.
Is that a second?
If you'd prefer that we just went ahead and voted, that would be fine.
Yeah,
too.
vote
Let's
too,
get
I
it
don't
on the
care.
record.
Let's just get it done and over with.
Okay, let's vote.
I'll second.
Okay? Commissioner Hammer?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gochis?
Aye.
I vote no. Doesn't do anything, so let's move on.
You're funny.
And your vice chair.
And
I'll
we'll keep
nominate
Chris.
Chris Sloan.
Yeah, I second it.
Anybody else would like to step up and sit in this comfy chair?
All right, I have a motion for Commissioner Sloan and we'll go ahead and close the nominations. To accept him as vice chair again, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Hammer?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
I love it here, so I'll say aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gochis?
Aye.
And Chairman Hamilton, I also vote aye. And that moves us on to, is that all for you, Mr. Agard?
I believe that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Number 14 on our agenda is a review and approval of the Planning Commission minutes for the meeting held on November 8th, 2023. I know it was a long time ago. Do I have a motion to approve or any corrections or additions?
So moved.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Proctor. Do I have a second?
Well, or Commissioner Sloan.
Okay, I'll second it.
Commissioner Sloan seconds. Commissioner Hammer?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gochis?
Aye.
Chairman Hamilton also votes aye.
To recall that whole chairman thing.
We can if you want. I'm good with that.
Are we supposed to set our meeting for next year too?
I think setting our meetings, are we going to do that this one or next one? We'll do that next one. we'll continue on our
Set them, then we don't have one scheduled.
original time for January's first meeting, and then we'll go from there, if that is good with everybody. All right. Open floor. Anybody else want to hang out for another hour?
I do not.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Please. We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
That was a Merry Christmas to everybody. That was a long meeting.